Hey all, this is a public service announcement. I wanted to make sure all realtors, within my brokerage or outside my brokerage, team members, and most importantly, consumers, listing agents that are considering Summit Credit Union pre-approvals, as well as buyer agents that have clients that are submitted with Summit Credit Union pre-approvals. This is a must hear. I personally have never come across a Summit Credit Union pre-approval in the past. Maybe I have, maybe I didn't, but normally I would think that a Summit Credit Union pre-approval is a good, safe option when considering for a seller, and equally the same when considering with a buyer. The problem here is that in our world, realtors do have their preferred lenders that we like to make a recommendation on, but in most instances, when we come across buyers that have their own preferred lender and we're working off a pre-approval, the pre-approval I thought it was 100% of companies, but apparently it's 99%, and agents, you'll understand where I'm coming from. If a buyer needs to sell a house in order to purchase a property, that lender's pre-approval will clearly define that in the pre-approval. And a lot of times buyer agents and lenders, they don't really connect until the offer is accepted, or in most instances when that pre-approval is brought to our attention. It's usually on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday when we are obviously logistically out with clients for the first time. Maybe not the first time, but we're out with clients where we're going to write on our first property for the very first time, right? So that pre-approval in most cases doesn't come across our plate till Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And most of these lenders, as you know, don't work nights and weekends, right? So Summit Credit Union is the same. Summit Credit Union, on their pre-approval, I shit you not, their lender contact information is a 1-800 number, and you have to dial an extension to reach your lender. The pre-approvals that I come across literally have the lender's cell phone number. That way, if I do have a question on nights and weekends, I'm able to get a hold of that lender on their personal cell phone. So that's issue number one, right? So Summit Credit Unions, you can't even reach, as a buyer agent, right? We can't even reach their lender to determine if we know that a client has a property to sell, that the pre-approval accurately reflects that a property needs to be sold in order to be purchased. So I came across a situation at my brokerage where our client, unfortunately, was in a situation where an offer was structured with a Summit Credit Union pre-approval, and on it, it never said that the client had to sell their house. So naturally, when I contacted Summit Credit Union, as we're trying to avoid a potential lawsuit, I'm trying to figure out where this potential home sale came from, because it wasn't on their pre-approval, right? The lender, if they were doing their job correctly, should have clearly stated that a home sale would need to commence in order for our client to purchase. The reason why that this is important is we were helping a buyer, right? The buyer was our client. Consider this now as a listing agent. You come across a pre-approval from Summit Credit Union and you have multiple offers, which in case this particular situation, there were multiple offers. The seller chose our offer, chose to rely on the accuracy and the transparency that Summit Credit Union gave us in that pre-approval. And in that pre-approval, it mentioned no thoughts about selling a house, right, in order to purchase. Seller chose our offer. Would they have chose our offer in a multiple offer situation, 2 to 5 offers on a property? Would the seller choose that offer had they known that there was a home sale contingency? Absolutely not, right? So of course, when we got to the point where we were at an impasse and we found out at loan commitment time frame that we needed a closing statement that shows the client's property selling, news to us, the pre-approval mentioned nothing about the property selling, right? The buyer themselves supposedly didn't realize that the property also needed to be sold. And if they were told, maybe it wasn't explained to them in a manner where it was clearly communicated to our side, right? Because again, all agents, when being handed a pre-approval from a lender on a weekend that typically mortgage brokers are the only lenders that will pick up the phone on nights and weekends. When you're dealing with big box banks like US Bank or Landmark or some of these credit unions, they don't work nights and weekends. The good ones do. You will find some lenders that will work nights and weekends, but for the most part, those credit unions and large banks will not pick the phone up on nights and weekends. So the situation that we were involved in is the Summit pre-approval did not disclose that a potential sale of our client's property had to be done essentially in order to close on their next property. It put us in breach, right? And lenders, when they pick up a file, they can't pick up a file and agree to pick that file up and start working on the terms of that offer. This particular lender said, yep, no home sale contingency, financing contingencies, we are good to go. There was never any mention like, I don't see a home sale contingency on this offer. Maybe as a lender, I should reach out to the realtor or to my client and say, hey, just FYI, your offer is contingent on the sale of your property. So where the story gets really weird is that in speaking with Summit Credit Union's manager of the loan department, they have little fine print in their pre-approval, and listing agents, you have to look at it. And I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know what it says off the top of my head. But it speaks to something to the effect of the home sale contingency lies within this statement that I'm paraphrasing. The buyer's finances cannot change. And if it should change, we have the ability to change the pre-approval, right? Or change the financing contingency type. They literally pointed to that language. And I paraphrase it. It's not exactly what it reads, but it allegedly the manager of the loan department said, hey, Mike, something happened between accepted offer and close where we're getting to the point where loan commitment is due. Something's changed in their finances and now we need their house to be sold. What the hell? Why wasn't this brought to our attention up front? Why didn't the lender proactively reach out to us with this information? Why didn't the buyer understand this situation, right? It is not my job as the realtor to explain the financing aspect of the situation. The lender is the one that's the Vince Lombardi, right? They are the architect, right? Me as Bart Starr and the buyer as James Lofton or whoever a Packer wide receiver was back in the 60s, right? Vince Lombardi is the one that they're the architect of the offense, right? We have to follow the game plan as quarterback, wide receiver. I don't draw the game plan, right? I work off the game plan that the lender gives us, right? So I was given bad information, or I shouldn't say me, our firm was given bad information. And I think Summit Credit Union comes from a good spot, right? Clearly, this is a standard practice for them. I don't think they get in lawsuits very often because, to be quite honest, in the past, most lawsuits were headed off because sellers could simply go back on the market and find another buyer, right? And then no lawsuits ensued. Summit Credit Union is getting really, really popular right now. I don't know the exact size, but I think as properties start to sit on the market longer, you're going to have a lot of sellers that are starting to look at potential damages being raised, and they're not going to just allow the buyer to escape scot-free like they have in the past. They're going to start going after earnest money because their property is going to take a lot longer to sell. So this is a warning for anyone that's coming across a Summit Credit Union pre-approval, right? This is my story. This is my instance. This is what I've dug into, right? I'm sharing my experience, what I've uncovered, right? So if Summit Credit Union is watching, I'm just sharing my experience with what I was told from their legal counsel as well as their manager. However, at the same time, I have to do a public service announcement to consumers because there are lenders out there that will put in their pre-approval that will not leave their buyer in a bad spot or their client, our mutual client, in a bad spot when an agent is trying to structure an offer on nights and weekends and the lender's unreachable, right? That is a disservice to buyers, right? Buyers have questions about what their financing costs are going to be, what the interest rates are going to be. They have a ton of questions when it comes to that, and often it falls on my plate to try to answer the lender's questions. The reality is most lenders don't pick the phone up on weekends. The good ones do, right? So if you got one that will pick the phone up on weekends, that's the one you should be working with. Summit Credit Union, on their pre-approval, you have to call a 1-800 number. They don't give out cell phone numbers. That's their policy. That's a company policy. So if you want to reach them, it's going to be during core business hours, and you have to pray that if you send them an email, that they're going to respond in a timely manner, which again, probably not going to happen on nights and weekends. So consumers, beware. If you're using Summit Credit Union, you have to be crystal clear about your financing situation. If you have a house to sell, it needs to be clearly defined. That way you can hold Summit Credit Union responsible if they're not telling you flat out and articulating perfectly that you need to sell your house in order to purchase. And if they do tell you that, that needs to be brought to our attention. It can't be where we structure an offer and then we're finding out after the fact. Of course, it's in the back of our mind. However, when we're under time constraints, like our client was on a weekend in a multiple offer situation, and their lender's not answering the phone, and their lender didn't articulate to a buyer who doesn't do this all day for a living that a home sale contingency was needed. Whether it was articulated or not, I can't prove that. However, the buyer in this instance doesn't recall having a conversation, and if they did, it wasn't brought to my attention or our firm's attention that a home sale contingency was needed. And if it was brought to the client's attention, they clearly didn't understand that it should have been passed on to us, right? So all in all, listing agents, verify Summit Credit Union pre-approvals. Buyer agents, verify Summit Credit Union pre-approvals. And buyers, make sure you understand your financing picture 100% when considering Summit Credit Union. They're probably a really reputable bank, but I wanted to share this experience with you guys. You guys have to understand the lender and the consequences that are involved if we are misleading a seller on accident to choose our offer, and then we can't close because there's a home sale contingency that is all of a sudden attached to this file and we didn't write that in. We're trying to sell the property, but it was never written in for protection. And it wouldn't be written in for protection if it wasn't in that pre-approval. The pre-approval needs to clearly state that there's a home sale contingency needed. That way, if we can't reach a lender on weekends or nights, we already know how to draw up that offer to purchase, structure it a way where we're leaving our clients protected. Summit Credit Union's position is that small fine print where if something changes with their financial picture, they might have to sell their house. It doesn't say that, right? I'm paraphrasing that. It doesn't say they have to sell a house, but that is a little bit of language that they pointed to, that the loan manager and their legal counsel, right? That's the disclaimer. They're going to point at that and say, well, we're covered, right? We told you, and we told the buyer, right? The buyer, if something changed with your picture financially, you might have to sell your property. Not communicated to us. So just want you guys to be aware. That's my public service announcement for the day. I need you guys to be careful. Obviously, Summit Credit Union, you already know that I'm posting this video. Hopefully you guys change your policies and provide transparency to consumers, to sellers, right? Sellers need this accurate information in order to make informed decisions, and we cannot fail buyers. These pre-approvals that don't have that language in there, because that is your company standard, supposedly, that's what I was told. It's standard protocol, industry. They said industry standard that pre-approvals do not have home sale contingencies in it. Up until recently, I thought 100% of lenders used home sale contingencies. I've never seen a pre-approval ever given to me where a home sale contingency was needed and it wasn't clearly articulated in that pre-approval. It's just absolutely insane. So Summit Credit Union, probably very, very reputable. Got nothing bad to say to them. You need to be aware of this practice and just be careful, right? It's probably completely above board with what they're doing. It's not above board to me, right? I'm going to always recommend a different lender when dealing with Summit Credit Union until I see a pre-approval moving forward where the pre-approval clearly articulates from Summit Credit Union that a home sale contingency is needed. And I've asked them to make that fix, and hopefully they listen. And if they don't, well, I'm going to continue questioning I'm going to continue looking at these pre-approvals, and if it's the only pre-approval we have, I will continue reaching out to the lenders and just making sure and verify. That is, I guess, our job now moving forward as buyer agents and as listing agents is double checking with the lender to make sure that it's credible, right? Make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. For agents that don't want to do that, or we don't have time to do that on nights and weekends in multiple offer situations, you know how this will work out, right? It's going to go to a different lender in most cases. So have a good one.